TopMed Talk.
Well, hello and welcome to TopMed Talk. We are here in Prato, Italy for the 7th Collaborative Clinical Trials in Anesthesiology. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kate Leslie. Hello, Kate.
Hi, Desiree. How are you?
I'm fantastic. You're on day 3, aren't we?
We are. It's been long but fabulous.
It has. It's the perfect way to describe that. Also joining us today is our editor-in-chief, co-editor-in-chief, Mike Grocott. Hello, Mike.
Morning, Desiree. I'm relieved I've made it to the end of the week.
It was touch and go there for a moment, but here we are. Fabulous content at the meeting this week. Some of it we can't talk here about on TopMed Talk because it's embargoed and we only hear it here. But highlights for you, Kate?
I love the new debate format. So trialists are presenting the basics of their recently published trials and then people are doing a pro and con kind of critique of it. Yeah. And it's been collegial and entertaining. I think it's been good.
Yeah, lots of laughs. Mike, how about you?
Lots of more interesting designs. So rather than maybe 6 years ago, we were lots of parallel group studies. Now there's all the platform trials, there's the real world evidence, there's a whole host of innovative designs, which have made it a really interesting week.
Yeah, and we've really been digging into those and not only talking about the trials themselves, but the designs and figuring out going forward. One of my favorite things is hearing from the editors of some of the major journals here in the U.S. And so we were so lucky. I think it's been a theme really this year over the last month to have these conversations with the editors of major journals in anesthesia as well as others across the world. And so we are so lucky and privileged to be sitting down with Jocelyn Clark, who's the international editor of the BMJ. Jocelyn, welcome to TopMed Talk.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I agree. It's been an amazing week and a really unusual and unique opportunity for a journal editor to be able to be circulating with jobbing clinical trialists and researchers. So I've had a wonderful time.
Tell us a little bit more about your role at BMJ and just a little bit more about yourself.
I'm Jocelyn Clark. I'm Canadian. I trained as a public health scientist, but I've spent the entire time of my professional career as a journal editor. 18 months ago, I was appointed international editor at the BMJ, and I had most recently been an executive editor of The Lancet for 7 years, including during the COVID pandemic, which was a pressure-filled but really thrilling period of time to be a journal editor during the time when we were trying to publish rapidly science to guide the public health response. Previous to that, I worked at PLOS Medicine and actually started my career 22 years ago at the BMJ. So my recent appointment and this amazing opportunity to help internationalize the BMJ was like returning home for me.
So Jocelyn, why would an editor of the BMJ want to come to the Collaborative Clinical Trials meeting?
2 reasons. These are some of the best and brightest doing clinical research, but particularly clinical trials in an emerging area of surgery, anesthesia, critical care. You know, these are maturing and very, very important areas of scientific enterprise, but also this is a leading group. So this meeting tends to bring folks who are really at the front edge of a community that's growing in size, but also in quality. And big general medical journals, of course, publish a lot of trials. Probably 50-60% of the research that we publish each year is a clinical trial. So we're really, really interested in hearing, what's coming down the pipe. That's the first reason. The second, as is probably obvious by my job title as international editor, like lots of journals, our journal at the BMJ is increasingly publishing work from around the world. And this meeting is becoming increasingly international. In fact, even some of the biggest and best trials that are seated at Monash in Australia, or we've got a number of colleagues from Canada, America, and Britain, and across Europe at this meeting, they're increasingly doing that work in international collaborations. That's good for science, that's good for patient care, and that's what journals are really interested in profiling.
So we've also benefited from your expertise at the meeting with, I think, 3 plenary lectures about various topics. And I think the one that we should talk about first is your terrific lecture about globalization in research, and not only the advantages but the challenges for us to involve countries that outside the high resource zone, and also for the investigators in that country. So what's the BMJ advocating for and trying to do, you get trialists to do in that space?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. It was a great opportunity to talk about what I think are the 2 key trends facing us. we're in this together. It's not journals at the end of a journey and, funders at the beginning and researchers in the middle. Actually, we exist in an ecosystem that is incredibly interdependent. I know that seems obvious, but it often needs to be overstated because folks in these different communities tend to feel like, we're working in our different silos, but actually we should be, and often are, taking decisions, need to support each other in a way that's very interdependent. And certainly the broader context, from my point of view and from the journal's point of view, is that there are two key trends. One is this increasing globalization of research and science, got turbocharged during COVID. So, it's an observation that everyone, I think, can agree and has made, that working across borders and certainly working with colleagues based in the Global South is a trend that started a long time ago, and it is the best way to generate evidence that can help create health for all. Because if we're not all healthy, none of us is healthy, I guess is the way the saying goes. And then the second key trend, which is more a kind of, let's call it a community standard or a best practice that's developing, and that's around equitable research partnerships. So what that emerging set of standards or expectations says is that when you're doing, when Mike and his colleagues, or Kate, you and your colleagues, initiate those important research questions and decide to trial, a new way of doing business in your clinical care, you're often nowadays partnering with either institutions and or colleagues in countries around the world, and increasingly in the Global South, where scientific capacity and expertise is growing massively. The traditional model is to partner with those colleagues with the idea that they'll help you, recruit patients, increase your sample size, that sort of thing. But more and more, we're beginning to recognize how important it is to actually have meaningful, genuine, equitable, sort of level playing field relationships with those colleagues. There's a lot of benefits to that. One, it makes your research better. Two, it helps you share the benefits of the work, including the resources, but it also lets you share the labor, the logistics, the how you mobilize resources to try to get science off the ground. And now there's more emerging guidance for how you enter into equitable partnerships. It's not just finding a colleague in the Global South with whom you could set up a trial site. It's actually having those colleagues in meaningful relationships, setting the agenda together, writing the grant together, deciding what the research questions are together, analyzing the data together, using statistical and other expertise on the ground, writing the paper together, deciding what your implementation plan is. And this is an expectation around equity and inclusion that isn't going away. And I think my goal at this meeting was to talk to colleagues who are doing great research about what these emerging standards are and how we might meet them.
Are there toolkits or sets of standards out there that our listeners can go and have a look at?
Yeah, my advice is the two, I think, leading kind of basic that lay out the sort of principles of equitable research partnerships are two. One is from TDR, which was originally called, the Tropical Diseases Research Partnership, which was part of WHO. They partnered with the NIHR in Britain to produce a guideline called Essence, and that lays out the principles of equitable research partnerships, as well as something called the Trust Code, which is a Global South initiated, it's like a code of conduct. It's something that you can engage with. And also it's, I think, a great tool to use when you bring your team together to have conversations about, what does this look like? What would distributed leadership look like, for example? What parts do people want to get involved in, and where do we have, maybe gaps or better coverage in certain areas across the life cycle of a research? So I recommend those two: TDR's Essence Guidelines and the Trust Code.
We can put those in the program notes for people to access. I've been interested, some of the insights you offered in this meeting around the nature of dialogue. For example, what you were just talking about, I can see funders having a big impact, insisting, a high allocation of funding to low resource environments. But how do the journals shape this conversation?
Thank you for raising that, because I think that's one question we were talking about a lot this week is who are the gatekeepers of these things? Because the funders actually do have a lot of power, don't they? And that's why it's great to see some of the major funders welcome TDR, which funds a lot of global health research, saying to researchers, we're happy to support your work. It sounds fantastic, but our other expectation is that when you go into partnership with international institutions, that you do so using these principles that encourage fairness, share distribution of labor, share benefits for sure, and also leave behind a better, stronger, more capable teams and resources in country. So funders, I think, have a really strong role. At the end of, let's say, the journey of the piece of research is when you're starting to write up your paper, and what journals have done to create a kind of, I guess it's a little carrot, a little stick, but it is, a lever for change, which is to say, we're no longer interested at the BMJ, for example, in a piece of research that was done in East Africa if that piece of research was not led by East African experts, of which there are an abundance. I mean, it's not like there isn't a vast pool of expertise around the world. The problem traditionally has been that there's so much power invested in high-income country institutions that they take control and kind of lead projects overlooking that vast expertise. So we have rules about things like that. We don't publish what some people call helicopter or parachute research, which is when a high-income country investigator or institution helicopters or flies into Bangladesh or Malaysia or, Ghana, does research, extracts the data, extracts the resources, and then goes back home to London or Boston and writes up the paper without giving due credit to those local investigators and trial participants and trial nurses and managers and that sort of thing. So we sort of, quote unquote, ban those practices, and hopefully that will help eradicate them. And then the other thing we do is that we ensure absolutely that if you're doing research, anyone's doing research in country, in the Global South, for example, that we ensure the peer reviewers that we use, and increasingly the editors that we have on our teams, because our teams are increasingly internationalizing, that they have the right expertise as well, so that we're making very, very informed decision about a piece of work, not doing so just sat at my desk in London, but really being able to tap into expertise within the field and within the geography. That's helping us make better decisions.
And you showed us that wonderful cover, which I think has your fingerprints all over it, the decolonisation cover on the BMJ.
Yeah.
Interesting concept.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I mean, it is a broad, in a lot of ways, quite a heady term. But the decolonizing health movement, which is growing and becoming much more vocal, and it certainly is something that a lot of our next generation students, leaders care about. Do you know that 50% of medical students in Britain and in North America are interested in global health careers? And 50% of North American medical schools have some variation of an international health program. I mean, that's how interested the next generation is in working in an international context. Now, listen, there's lots of amazing work out there showing the potential harms of that and whether we need that many high-income country students trained in international health. And if they're not properly supported and those programs aren't properly defined, we'll just end up, recreating that helicopter research thing that I was just describing. But yeah, the decolonizing health movement, I mean, it's critical. And in some ways, it feels deep and historical and complex. And that's not something everyone can get their head around. But actually, what it teaches us, I think, those of us who work in medicine and science, is really, on one hand, profoundly simple, but also massively important, which is that colonial histories, which shape all of our institutions and all of our life experiences, all of our training programs, that those are steeped in legacies of injustice and exclusion. And they're still present in our current systems. We forget how much empire shaped medicine and how the past of what we do both, created discriminatory practices, but actually has really left an imprint now. So it's a really more interesting way to think about the persistence of inequities, for example, and it can help you uncover what solutions might be. So, thank you, to be able to have a theme around decolonization of health be on the cover of the BMJ, which is one of those journals that is a legacy and was birthed of an imperial age. To have that on the cover of a journal that's been publishing for almost 200 years is fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
I had one question. Earlier in the week, we had this platform trials workshop, and you were sharing some anecdotes, I guess, about the heat of COVID and some of the interactions that you had with the investigators. It sounded like much more of a conversation than I'd realised in terms of your discussions with some of the big COVID platform trials. Can you share a little bit of that with our listeners?
It might surprise listeners to know that journal editors don't just sit behind a computer and wait till you've fully cooked your 7-year, 10-year trial and see it for the first time. But actually, increasingly, because medical publishing is competitive and we're all interested in publishing the best science, that we benefit a great deal from learning about trials that are ongoing. And during COVID, there was so much pressure to rapidly assess the big trials that were going to be producing answers to questions that might have a great impact on people's health and lives in the context of a global health emergency, that when the COVID platform trials were initiated, particularly in Britain, of course, those were being done by existing research groups that we had relationships with. So we would have been reaching out to those folks and asking them how they were getting on and asking them what they were thinking about in terms of publication. And, I don't mind admitting at all, it will surprise no one. At the time I was at The Lancet, it will surprise no one that as a Lancet editor, it was gutting to see the first trial reports from the two big platform trials, Recovery and Solidarity, both of them to go to the New England Journal of Medicine, which, obviously is a journal I read and admire, and I like their editorial stuff. I know some of them, but at the same time, it is a competition, and we just wanted to get the information out there quickly. Subsequently, many of the papers from those two really important platform trials were published in our journal. And at the end of the day, we were all in it together.
Yeah, that's great. Kate, how about you?
I know that you can't talk for 2 minutes on the intersectionality between gender, publishing and global health, but I'd just like to say how great it was to hear from you again on that subject. And whenever you speak, you stimulate so much discussion, among the delegates at this meeting about the issues. So how does it feel to be a champion for women in publishing and research?
Thanks. It feels like it's the only thing that matters to me. I've devoted my whole career to trying to globalize the medical literature, and I think there's a bit of progress there. And I care about nothing really more professionally than I do about increasing and advancing women in science, medicine, and global health. But the other way I feel about it, Kate, is that the progress is too slow and it's frustrating because we've been describing the problem for the 20 years that I've been working professionally. The solutions lie in institutions and those who hold the power to change, and they're not evidently interested in changing because they need to step away and create more conducive environments for women to thrive. Medicine in particular has a problem because compared to other areas of science like engineering and even law and mathematics, for example, this is well documented by major organizations, medicine has a level of harassment and abuse experienced by women in the operating theater as well as in other areas of medicine and surgery that far exceed what we see in other areas. So medicine really does still have a problem, and we need to keep pushing to make that better. Thank you.
Well, thanks for your part in doing that.
Yeah.
Desiree. Yeah.
Now, well, as we wrap, again, I would love to spend more time on this topic. It's something we talk about here on TopMed Talk. But words of advice, we have people who may be able to make institutional change, but we also have a lot of young, early career men and women, but especially women. What would be some of the advice, just a bit of a tagline for women in research, early career researchers, whenever they're wanting to move in this space?
My advice to early career and all women is you don't need to be fixed. Yeah. You're going to get messages from your institution and your medical school that you need to be better or different in order to succeed and fit in this institution. I'll watch my language, but that is absolutely the message there is you keep doing you and keep doing what yourself. The main message, Desiree, needs to be to the men who occupy positions of power and hold on to them for a long, long time. They're responsible for work environments in which, way too many women experience harassment and abuse, for example. Way too many women experience barriers to advancing their careers. They have every right to work in a workplace that's free of harassment, and they have every right to be in a workplace that supports their rights, but also their career aspirations and their dreams. So, I'm flipping that on you, and I have no patience for the continued focus on let's fix women rather than let's fix the system.
Yeah.
We need to fix the system.
Yeah. Power. Love it. Absolutely.
Go, sister.
Thank you, Jocelyn, so much. It is empowering to hear your words, and I hope that we can talk to you again, dive a little bit more into this. So cheers to you. Thanks for listening to TopMed Talk. You can find conversations like this at topmedtalk.com or on your favorite podcatcher, on your favorite social media platform. Check us out. If you found us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. That every little bit helps TopMed Talk to keep TopMed Talk free and open access to the world. So cheers, everybody. Thanks, Jocelyn. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
TopMed Talk.
Thanks for downloading TopMed Talk. Don't forget to subscribe. Check us out on YouTube and, of course, on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook and X. Also, it's important to remember that TopMed Talk is the broadcasting arm of Epom, evidence-based perioperative medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that, and the way to do that is epom.org. Check out our website and find out about some of the incredible conferences we're going to be arranging across the year. epom.org.